I took 22 cruises in 2025, and somewhere around cruise number 14, I realized I had been getting a lot of things wrong. Wrong in ways that cost me money and robbed me of the joy I should have been experiencing, even on some of the most incredible ships I have ever stepped foot on. But the truth is this. A lot of what cruise lines push you to focus on doesn't really matter nearly as much as they want it to. And after this many sailings, that became impossible to ignore. So whether you're planning your first cruise or your 50th, the lessons I learned might just save your next cruise. My biggest takeaway after cruising as much as I did last year was that the cruise experience you're after has almost nothing to do with what gets advertised. It comes down to how your money is actually being spent and how your expectations shape the trip before it even begins. So in this video, I'm walking you through 8 lessons that came from spending more than 100 nights on board cruise ships last year, and they might just be the difference between a cruise you remember and one you regret. Oh, and if we haven't met yet, I'm Evan from Family at Sea. If this is your first time watching my channel, I'm glad you're here. If you've been here a while, you already know how much I appreciate you. If you're ready, I am. Let's go. While the cruise line you choose absolutely matters, what matters even more is when you're sailing and how long you're actually on board. I know that sounds backwards because we spend so much time comparing Royal Caribbean to Carnival to Norwegian, etc., but stay with me. 3 of the most stressful cruises we took last year were not on budget lines at all. One was on Disney Cruise Line, which is the most expensive mainstream cruise line out there, and the other 2 were on Celebrity and Royal Caribbean, 2 lines we genuinely love. And what they all had in common was timing and length. They were all short sailings packed in the holiday weekends, because those short sailings create a non-stop sense of urgency. The pools stay packed, energy levels never really come down, and on Disney in particular, with every room filled capacity with families, we had the longest waits we've ever had on a cruise ship throughout the entire sailing. If you want high energy and a party style trip, short holiday sailings can be a great fit. But if your goal is to slow down, relax, and disconnect, 3 or 4 days really isn't enough time to do that because you're just starting to settle in when it's already time to pack up and head home. One thing that's become clear more than ever is that far too many people are loyal to cruise lines that aren't loyal to them. Every cruise line has diehard fans, and if you suggest they even consider trying something else, you're going to catch heat from people who haven't even tried the alternatives themselves. And look, I know a lot of you watching right now are probably chasing status for perks that really aren't worth that much, and well, they can change at any moment, like we saw with Carnival last year. Sure, you might save a few minutes boarding or get free laundry, but you could pay for those upgrades on other lines and still come out ahead with better pricing. Now, of course, there are exceptions. Royal and Celebrity give you access to the suite areas and free drinks at the upper tiers, which is legitimately valuable. But most loyalty programs aren't anywhere near that generous, and you're going to spend a lot of money getting to those levels. But here's the part that actually matters. Every cruise line offers something worth experiencing, and none of them get everything right. And trying other cruise lines gives you perspective. Maybe you find something better, or maybe you realize what you already had was perfect. But either way, you'll actually have confidence in knowing that you're actually making the right choice instead of secretly hoping you're not wrong. One of the biggest lessons I learned last year is just how much easier cruising becomes when you use a good travel agent. I used to think booking myself gave me more control, but what I actually got was more work and fewer options. When I started working with travel agents regularly, I was shocked at how much less stressful the entire experience became. They handled price drops, watched for better cabins, found group rates I never would have seen on my own, and they saved me money more often than I expected. But most importantly, I stopped spending time second guessing every decision. And that's why we've started booking our cruises through Cruises It. With their low price guarantee and real humans who actually know what they're doing, Cruises It makes cruising simpler, cheaper, and way less stressful. It's one of the easiest wins in cruising that most people still overlook. So if you're ready to save money and take the stress out of cruising as well, click the link in the description below or call the number on the screen and tell them Evan from Family at Sea sent you. You'll be glad you did. New ships are impressive. There is no denying that. The shows are bigger, the attractions are flashier, and the first time you experience them, it really is exciting. But what surprised me last year is how little of that spectacle actually really matters to the full experience. Most of the jaw-dropping moments on new ships only last a few minutes at a time. And after that, you're still left with the same question for the rest of the sailing. Well, how does this ship feel day to day? Older ships often get overlooked, but many of them offer just as much substance and sometimes even more, and typically for a lot less money. They're easier to get around, have more ocean views, and they're better suited for slowing down instead of constantly chasing the next attraction. Now, yes, spectacle is fun, there's no denying that, but substance is what determines whether a cruise feels great from the first day to the last. The drink package taught me something last year that honestly, I didn't expect. And it wasn't about the math, it was about the pressure. When I have the drink package, I feel an unspoken need to get my money's worth. So I try more drinks, I drink more often, and I take in more calories without really getting any more enjoyment out of it. And when I skip the drink package, I still buy drinks when I want one, but I drink less, enjoy them more, and I feel better by the end of the trip. And that same mindset applies to food as well because unlimited access creates pressure to overdo it. But last year, after more than 100 nights on board, I actually lost 7 pounds by letting go of that pressure. I moved more, skipped meals when I wasn't hungry, stopped finishing plates out of obligation, and started enjoying my meals and my drinks without the guilt. Unlimited sounds freeing, but in practice, intention works better. One fear I hear all the time is that booking a private excursion means risking getting left behind, but after cruising as much as we do and dozens of private tours, that fear feels wildly overblown. We booked private excursions in port after port, and there wasn't a single tour operator that was ever even close to getting us back late. In fact, we were never back to the port with less than an hour to spare before all aboard, which was often earlier than cruise line tours that had large groups to wrangle. Good private tour operators understand ship schedules, and their entire business depends on getting you back on time. And they're not going to risk their entire livelihoods by having you miss the ship. That doesn't mean there's zero risk, but it does mean the risk is far smaller than people imagine. It's akin to people who are scared to fly. Sure, there's risk that the plane could crash, but how much of life are you missing out on by letting an irrational fear drive your decision making? Sticking only with the cruise line excursions often means you're paying more for a more crowded experience and really out of no other reason than fear itself. With a little planning and common sense, private excursions can be safer, calmer, and far more enjoyable. But if you still want peace of mind while saving money and still having access to smaller, more intimate tours alongside a back to ship guarantee, I've linked my preferred tour company, Shore Excursions Group, in the pinned comment below. One lesson I had to learn the hard way is to stop letting other people tell me how I should feel about an experience. Who would do that? Reviews and opinions from people like myself or on social media can be helpful for setting expectations, but they are terrible at predicting how a cruise will actually feel for you. If I would have listened to what other people said, I never would have given Margaritaville at Sea a chance, and it turns out they're one of my favorite cruise lines. Not because their ships are fancy or luxurious, but because they have the laid back feel of a classic cruise experience that I truly appreciate. On YouTube, it doesn't matter what I say about a cruise, whether I love it or I hate it. Somebody is going to tell me just how wrong I am. But the reality is, we all value different things, and the same ship can feel completely different depending on the itinerary, the crowd, the timing, and even the weather. If there's an itinerary that excites you at a price you're comfortable with, don't let someone like me scare you off. Go experience it for yourself because that's the only way to know what actually works for you. And after all of that, this next one ended up being the biggest lesson of all. My biggest disappointments almost always came from cruises where my expectations were the highest. And some of my best experiences came from cruises where I had no expectations at all. And a perfect example of this was my 4 day sailing over St. Patrick's Day on the Carnival Conquest. That sounds like the perfect recipe for absolute chaos, so I went in expecting the worst. And sure, there were parties, but I found quiet moments, met some incredible people, and I ended up having a genuinely great time. And a big reason for that was my mindset. Expectations work both ways. When they're too high, disappointment is almost always guaranteed. But when they're realistic or even low, you leave room to be surprised. And that realization completely changed a lot about how I'm going to approach cruising in 2026. So, as I head into the new year, I'm changing the way I cruise in some very intentional ways. First, I'm doing my best to step on board every cruise with fewer expectations. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to be ignoring when things go wrong, but I'll be refusing to let one disappointing moment define an entire trip. I want to be more present, more flexible, and more focused on finding what is good instead of fixating on what's not. I'm also done chasing spectacle just for the sake of it. The marketing hype is loud, but that's not what makes a cruise meaningful. What matters more to me now is connection with my fellow cruisers, the crew I meet along the way, and the connection with the oceans we sail. So that means finding the moments that slow life down instead of speeding it up. And it also means being just as intentional about sailing older ships as I am about trying new ones, because substance often shows up where people aren't looking. And finally, I want to make the most of every cruise moment, and I want to share it honestly with all of you. Not in an overly polished or exaggerated way, just the real experiences I encounter at sea. And if you're wondering how any of this is even possible, how I'm able to cruise this often, or how this fits into real life without it all falling apart, that's exactly what this next video is all about. I'm sharing my personal story, the decisions behind it, and how cruising became part of my life in a way that actually works. So don't stop here, watch that video next, and I'll connect the dots on how all of this comes together. I'll see you there. If you're ready, I am. Let's go.